you're the CEO of this organization called Quirk, which we're going to find out about in a minute. But just give me a sense of your career. You've got an Australian accent for start. That needs explaining.
Yeah, so got to South Africa here about 7 years ago full time. My mother's South African, and so I had an opportunity to come across when her and my father parted ways. And it's been a great journey ever since. I love the place. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, and I think this will be the stepping stone into Africa. And clearly there's a big upside there.
So you were, though, in financial markets. I know this about you, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, my background's finance economics, and I was lucky enough to get a job at Morgan Stanley in London, and lucky enough to be chosen to go to the fixed income desks.
Lucky, fixed income.
Well, in the day it was lucky. It was right now, not so much. Yeah, and then I was lucky enough to get on the synthetic credit desk, which was lucky at the time as well. Not so much anymore. They're pretty sparse desks. And I started off doing hedge trades. So I was a junior, hedging our books and doing what's called strip convertibles and stuff, and then also doing credit default swaps.
Okay, but when you first came to South Africa, I became aware of you when you were at the Internet Solution, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So my background's tech, and when I was on the desk, I covered the tech counters, the tech credit.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Australia. We had one of the first IBM PCs. My dad was an IBM salesman, and my mum was a Microsoft trainer. So I've been kind of coding and gaming since I was about 10. And so, you know, when I retired from banking because of a couple of cognitive dilemmas, I then naturally went to tech, and I was lucky enough to get into Internet Solutions with, you know, the legend Ronnie Aptek and Angus McRobert. So it was a really good journey.
Okay, tell us about Quirk, because that's really why I wanted to talk to you. It's a firm which is getting a lot of kind of visibility in the sort of social media and online and sort of e-marketing environment. So just tell us about the company, and then we can talk about the theories behind it.
Yeah, so we're about a 200 plus person strong business. We got offices in Cape Town, Joburg and London, and we kind of do everything from digital strategy into continental Europe through to building big websites for the likes of Capitec and Liberty, all the way through to social media, and then all the way through to media buying like banner ads, Google PPC, pay-per-click stuff. So kind of full service marketing agency that's kind of born digital. And we're starting to do a few television commercials and stuff like that. So it's very exciting for us, yeah.
But it really is full spectrum. But let's just go back to the first part of that. So obviously there are businesses which are in the process of transitioning their businesses to be more and more online. I mean, the banks come to mind, but there must be plenty of other examples like that too. Yeah,
there's tourism's huge. You know, that's the biggest sector at the moment online. Big e-commerce opportunities, and you know, a lot of Google search optimization that can convert directly into room nights. So great revenue generator. There's a big push for e-commerce across all our clients, and there's a big push for making that mobile as well. And that presents some interesting challenges which are very avant-garde. They're kind of mainstream in London and the States, but very avant-garde here, and it's kind of it's super exciting for us, yeah.
Because obviously the new generation smartphones make web browsing, in fact, kind of manageable.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, if you read the numbers and you see how many of the online users are in fact mobile, it almost makes one feel as though you should, you know, build the site for the mobile experience by preference.
Well, that's a great point. And there's a big philosophical movement at the moment. It's called mobile first and responsive design. So you actually design your website with the mobile interface as the primary, and then you kind of add to it thereafter. We're very bullish on the mobile space, even for Africa. Huawei's just introduced a handset that costs $100. That's a smartphone, Android smartphone. And data rates are falling off a cliff. I mean, you know, it really is good. I mean, we're not cheap enough yet compared to some of the countries in the rest of the globe. But certainly there's a major movement in the space, and quite frankly, the cell phone carriers, the mobile phone carriers, are having their revenues, their ARPUs lifted by data.
Yeah.
So massive data explosion. Smartphones offer a very unique perspective, and you know, there's that whole 2-year-old anecdote where your 2-year-old can pick up a smart device and start getting to know the interface. That's very powerful, because then you kind of jump the literacy barrier, and you can start doing some really interesting things.
Okay, what about businesses that have traditionally operated in the real world, so to speak, like, you know, retailers with big stores? What are the challenges for them, and what would a firm like yours be able to do with those big players in order to kind of bump up their sales and get them out there?
Yeah, so there's some e-commerce frameworks out there that are fairly well known now. So it's not so much bleeding edge. There's stuff that you can do, most of it relatively cheaply. The big things there are trying to tie in a product database into the website and making that intuitive for users,
Right.
because it's easy to dump product codes into a database, but to make that meaningful to an end user is kind of tough.
Yeah.
You normally have it displayed in a real world scenario. And so getting that display and the user experience is the key. So user experience is fundamental to that kind of stuff. It's easy to build an e-commerce site. To get what we call conversions, which means revenue, requires a lot of expertise in user experience and information architecture. But it's growing, it's huge.
And then what about that sort of holy grail of the sort of online environment where your brand kind of transcends the sort of boring, yes, it's always there kind of thing, and suddenly goes viral with a YouTube sensation, or starts getting mentioned in positive reviews on Twitter and all that kind of thing. Does that stuff happen by accident, or can it actually be prompted?
It can be prompted, but these viral or what we call memes you can never guarantee them. But there are certain common traits in all of these that you need to have embedded, put into the cooking pot of the production of the digital asset. It's usually based around humor. The latest one is this Occupy Wall Street, the policeman that spray painted a protester. That's kind of gone viral and taken on a whole meaning of its own, and there's video clips and there's music clips and all that kind of stuff. Now that wasn't premeditated, and in fact the viral stuff has to look as if it wasn't premeditated, because then it doesn't work. And so this talks to very much brands being human. So if you want to do it through a brand, it's got to come across as human, not manufactured, and that's the same with social media.
What about brands in social media? Because some people say that it's intrusive and that it's problematic, and that when you're looking at your stream on Twitter, you don't want to see a promoted tweet from a company. It's a bit like a grown-up lurking at your party, that kind of thing. Do you think there's an absolute barrier there and you've just got to kind of respect that? Or do you think we're going to move into a world where increasingly there are physical brand promotion things happening in the social media space?
It's a very good point. So if it interrupts the user, it's not a good strategy. The reality is Twitter has to make money, otherwise it's not going to exist. So it's going to have to lay some kind of advertising. But you hit on a key point. It's got to be accretive to the experience. So what we're finding a lot of brands doing that are successful in this space is turning into publishers almost. And so they're creating content that's very kind of exciting for users. So Coke kind of promises a better lifestyle, and all their production is done around that. So when they deliver this content in social media, it's fun, you want to watch it. That's what brands have to do. Not all brands can kind of link to that, but that's what you've got to do.
Well, in fact, one last question is, what about like CEOs putting out the word, or like sort of aggregate corporate personalities being created? Do you think that's a good strategy, or not
Absolutely.
always?
I think Peter Ace and Mark Jordan have done it the best in this space. Right. And that talks to the human element. You need to humanize your brand. And so when I give these social media talks, it's not about the technology, it's actually about the people. And the lesson I try and get across is, what you do successfully as a human to socialize, you need to transpose that onto tech. And all the technology does is turbocharge that. It's very much not about technology, social media.
But clearly you need somebody that's a corporate asset like that. Not all of these guys
no,
are.
that's bang for buck. But you see a lot of smaller brands doing it quite successfully, just with an interesting type character curating the social stuff.